Moving away from Chandrayaan, now US President Donald Trump has called off peace talks with the Taliban. This after the terror group has claimed responsibility for a car bomb attack in Kabul, which killed 12 people, including an American soldier. Trump took to Twitter to announce that Taliban leaders were due to meet him for secret talks in Camp David in US. He also said that he was going to meet Afghan President Ashraf Ghani separately. The US President hit out at the terror group, saying that if it cannot agree to a ceasefire during the important peace talks, then it probably does not have the power to negotiate a meaningful agreement anyway. He also slammed the Taliban for trying to use the Kabul blast as a bargaining chip. Meanwhile, the Afghan government has said that the real peace will only come when Taliban ends violence and holds direct talks with Kabul. Now remember, on Thursday, Taliban attacked a heavily fortified area in the Afghan capital. A Romanian NATO soldier was also killed in the blast along with an American soldier. The attack comes as US nears a peace deal with the Taliban, with negotiations mainly taking place in Qatar. However, the talks have been criticized as Taliban has refused to hold negotiations with the internationally recognized Ghani government. As per the draft deal, Taliban would give up arms and help in combating terror groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS in exchange of US troops' withdrawal from Afghanistan. The US has also agreed to certain security arrangements proposed by Taliban. This as Washington seeks to end its longest war. Now, the US hopes that the peace talk would set tone for negotiations between the Afghan government and Taliban. However, the talks have raised fears that Taliban would dissolve human rights in Afghanistan after the deal has been signed. And for more details, let's quickly go across to Mr. Najib Sharifi, who's a senior analyst at Afghan Journalist Safety Committee. He's joining us live from Kabul. Mr. Sharifi, a very warm welcome to you here on WION. Now, let me begin by saying that a face-to-face meeting with the Taliban at Camp David just ahead of the 18th anniversary of 9/11 would have been an extraordinary diplomatic move by the US President. Now, how surprising is the news of the cancellation of peace talks, and what happens to the US troops in Afghanistan now?
It was extremely surprising for us in Afghanistan to see that the plan that the Taliban would be invited to Camp David to meet with President Trump and President Ghani. However, the cancellation of that meeting and the fact that there's more recognition on the part of the U.S. that the Taliban may not be either genuine about peace talks or maybe using escalating violence to gain more bargaining chip. It's something that Afghans welcome, because there was deep fears about among Afghans and on the part of the Afghan government that the U.S. may sign a deal that will not meaningfully guarantee peace, and a deal that might allow us to lose a significant chunk of the civil liberties and the democratic rights that we have gained in the past 18 years.
All right, Mr. Najibi, the Taliban had never agreed to end their violent campaign against Afghan and foreign forces while the peace talks were taking place. Be it the Kabul car bombing that killed 12 people or the abducted 6 Afghan journalists, these are just recent examples that I'm giving to you. Taking the attacks into consideration, what happens to the situation in Afghanistan now?
I believe, well, there are two scenarios. One is that the pressure that this might impose on the Taliban will coerce them to reduce the amount of violence. And the other possibility is that they may further escalate violence. This is something that we need to wait and see how the Taliban and their patrons, international patrons, react towards this move by President Trump. So it's premature to talk about its effect on the Taliban.
All right. Now, going by the latest developments, do you see an advantage for the Ghani government, which was always opposing US peace talks with the Taliban? Could the latest developments also impact the elections that are due in Afghanistan?
Well, it's already created a sense of vindication among the Afghan government, President Ghani and his team, because they were always expressing their concerns about the negotiations and the fact that they're being they're not being properly included or properly briefed. And the fact, that this deal could jeopardize peace and liberties in Afghanistan, or may not guarantee peace and liberties. So this has reinforced their spirit in terms of them being right, and it has also reinforced the spirit of conducting elections on the due date.
All right. Now, Mr. Sharifi, be it the Hanoi summit regarding the denuclearization of Korean Peninsula or the trade talks with China, Donald Trump is someone who's known for walking away from high-stake talks before. Will Afghanistan be another chink in the armor for a president who promised to withdraw troops as part of his election promise back in the year 2016?
I think, this move by President Trump, we should be recognizing the fact that it may not be total cancellation of peace talks. This is a cancellation of the meeting, between President Trump and the Taliban and President Ghani. However, I believe, that President Trump is using this as a bargaining chip as well to basically put more pressure. But I do not believe, that this necessarily translates into cessation of peace talks. Peace talks, I believe, will continue.
All right. Now, what could peace in Afghanistan finally look like in the future?
Oh, well, if we talk about near future, even if we have peace with the Taliban, that will not necessarily mean cessation of violence, because we have many other extremist groups who are hardcore ideological groups who believe in the idea of jihad and violence, and that's the best or the only means for them. We will still have some level of violence, but I believe, sustainable and long-term and comprehensive peace is something that will require a lot of time, because in the past 3 decades, the seeds of violent extremism have grown significantly in Afghanistan. And unless and until those seeds are eliminated, I don't believe we will have comprehensive peace in Afghanistan.
All right, Mr. Najib, some in Afghanistan fear that any deal could see hard-won rights and freedoms eroded and the Taliban back in power. But after today, Afghanistan is staring back at an abyss. Is Afghanistan now more dangerous than ever?
It is more dangerous than ever, and I believe it's going to remain dangerous. But I'm optimistic that in future the parties will have to resort to some sort of peace deal, because benefit any party or any country in the region or beyond.
All right. What happens to the fate of those 6 abducted Afghan journalists now?
Well, there are already attempts going on to basically free them, and I received some news earlier from my colleagues that they have already been freed. This is something that I have to, reconfirm. There are very serious work going on by the Safety Committee to free them from the Taliban.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Najib Sharifi, for joining us here on World is One and for sharing your precious perspective.